My earliest memories are filled with the sound of shouting. Dad's voice would boom through our small house, making the walls seem to shake. Mom would try to keep her voice down, probably thinking of me and my baby sister Lillian, but sometimes she couldn't help but shout back. I was 7 then, and Lillian was just too young to really understand what was happening. I remember watching Mom brush Lillian's hair one morning, singing softly to her. That was the last time I saw her do that. Later that day, the shouting started again, worse than ever before. "You're impossible, Robert," Mom's voice cracked. "You control everything I do, everyone I talk to." The divorce happened fast after that. One day Mom was just gone. Dad told us she'd left us, that she'd chosen alcohol and other men over her own daughters. I was old enough to feel confused and betrayed, but young enough to believe him completely. It wasn't long before Dad brought Sarah home. She was younger than Mom, always smiling, and she clearly adored Lillian. My baby sister took to her immediately, calling her mommy within weeks. But I couldn't do it. Every time Sarah tried to hug me or do my hair the way Mom used to, I'd pull away. "Chloe," Dad would say sternly, "Sarah is trying her best. You need to be more grateful." But how could I be grateful? I still had a mom, a real one, somewhere out there. Where was she? Why didn't she call? Why didn't she fight to see us? These questions haunted me through my childhood, but I learned to keep them to myself. Sarah doted on Lillian, buying her pretty dresses and taking her to dance classes. I was invited too, but I always refused. I threw myself into books instead, spending hours in my room studying. It was easier than watching my sister build a relationship with my replacement mother. Years passed this way, with Lillian becoming more and more Sarah's daughter while I remained stubbornly on the outside. But I had a plan. I studied hard, knowing that education would be my ticket to freedom. While Lillian was being groomed to be the perfect daughter, I was plotting my escape through college applications and scholarship essays. Finally, at 18, I was free. College felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. My dorm room might have been tiny, but it was mine, no Sarah hovering, no dad dictating rules, no constant reminder of being the difficult daughter. I still came home during breaks, trying to maintain some connection with Lillian. During one of these visits, in my final year, I found her in her room, which looked like a princess's chamber, all pink and white, courtesy of Sarah's decorating obsession. "So, what are your plans after graduation?" I asked, settling into her window seat. "Have you thought about which colleges you might want to apply to?" Lillian was sprawled across her bed, perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone screen. "Oh, I'm not going to college," she said, as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Married? You're not even 18 yet." "When did this happen?" "Sarah introduced me to Marcus last year." She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes sparkling. "His family owns that big real estate company downtown, you know, Preston Properties? They're loaded, Chloe. And he's absolutely perfect." "But what about your dreams? You used to talk about becoming a teacher," I reminded her, thinking of the little chalkboard she'd had as a kid. Lillian waved her hand dismissively. "That was just kid stuff. Sarah says I don't need college anyway. She believes a woman's real purpose is to create a family and have children. Why waste time with degrees when I can start my real life now?" I gripped my coffee mug tighter, fighting the urge to launch into a lecture about feminism and independence. "Just think carefully about what you really want, Lil. Not what Sarah wants, not what Marcus wants. What you want." "I know what I want," she rolled her eyes. "Not everyone needs to be a career woman like you." The way she said it, like being a career woman was some kind of character flaw, made my stomach twist. But I stayed quiet. After all, it was her life to live. After graduation, I found a nice apartment across town and started working as a remote accountant. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough and gave me the independence I craved. Meanwhile, Lillian married Marcus in a lavish ceremony that Sarah orchestrated down to the last crystal champagne flute. Within a year, my baby sister was a mother herself, with little James arriving right on schedule. A year later came Emma. That's when my peaceful life started unraveling. The first time Lillian showed up unannounced, she was wearing designer workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, carrying 2 baby bags and looking perfectly put together despite supposedly being an exhausted new mom. "I have a spa appointment," she announced, already setting the bags down in my living room. "You'll watch them, right?" "Thanks, sis. James just ate, and Emma might need a diaper change soon." "Oh, and James likes his stuffed elephant for nap time, it's in the blue bag somewhere." Before I could even process what was happening, she was gone, leaving me with a toddler and an infant. This became a regular occurrence. Lillian would appear with some urgent appointment, lunch date, or shopping trip, dropping the kids off like they were packages to be delivered. The real shock came when she and Marcus decided to take a romantic getaway. No warning, no asking, they just showed up at my door with the kids and enough supplies for 3 days. The constant interruptions were driving me insane. My work as an accountant required focus and attention to detail, something nearly impossible to maintain with 2 small children running around. Every time I'd settle into a spreadsheet, there'd be a cry, a crash, or a "Auntie Chloe, I'm hungry." I tried working early mornings before Lillian's surprise visits, late nights after the kids went home, weekends when I should have been relaxing. But it wasn't enough. My boss had started noticing errors in my work, small mistakes that could have serious consequences. "Why don't you ask Sarah and Dad to watch them sometimes?" I suggested one day as Lillian dropped off the kids for the 3rd time that week. "Or maybe Marcus's parents?" "Dad's always at work," Lillian replied, already halfway out the door. "And Sarah says the noise gives her migraines. Besides, you're so good with them." I watched her walk away in her perfectly pressed designer outfit, not a hair out of place, and fought back the urge to scream. She couldn't handle them alone all day, but somehow I was supposed to handle them while working a full-time job? The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had a crucial deadline, and James was particularly energetic that day. I'd turned away from my laptop for just a moment to stop Emma from eating a crayon when I heard the thud. James had been jumping on the couch, something I'd told him not to do countless times, and had fallen off. He seemed fine at first, but by the time Lillian came to pick them up, an angry purple bruise had spread across his shin. The moment she saw it, she exploded. "What the hell, Chloe," she screamed, making both kids start crying. "I trust you with my children, and this is how you watch them." He could have been seriously hurt. "Maybe if you actually watched your own kids," I started, but she cut me off. "I knew I shouldn't have left them with you. You're so irresponsible. What were you doing, too busy with your precious spreadsheets, to keep my son safe?" Something in me snapped. Years of resentment, of being taken for granted, of being expected to put my life on hold for everyone else's convenience, it all came pouring out. "Get out," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Take your kids, and get out of my apartment." "Excuse me? I'm done being your free babysitter. I have a job, Lillian. A real job that pays my bills. I can't keep dropping everything because you need a spa day or lunch with your friends. Hire a professional babysitter." I practically pushed them into the hallway, ignoring Lillian's shocked expression and the kids' confused tears. The moment the door closed, my phone started ringing. "Dad. What the hell do you think you're doing?" he roared before I could even say hello. "Your sister is crying her eyes out. How dare you treat her this way? If she doesn't like how I watch her kids, she can watch them herself," I shot back. "You will apologize to your sister immediately. This kind of behavior is unacceptable." "Unacceptable? What's unacceptable is dumping your kids on someone without warning and then getting mad when they can't provide professional childcare while working full-time. Listen here, young lady," his voice dropped to that dangerous tone I remembered from childhood. "If you don't start showing more respect to your sister and treating your family better, you can forget about your inheritance." I'll leave everything to Lillian. After this threat, I knew I needed to handle things differently. The constant tension wasn't good for anyone, especially the kids. So I swallowed my pride and called Lillian. "Hey," I said when she answered, my voice carefully neutral. "Can we talk?" "I was going to call you actually," she replied, sounding surprisingly calm. "I might have overreacted a bit yesterday." We met for coffee at a neutral location, the small cafe halfway between our apartments. Lillian looked tired, the perfectly put-together facade slightly cracked. "Look," I started, stirring my latte. "I love James and Emma, you know I do. But I can't keep dropping everything at a moment's notice. I need to be able to plan my work schedule." Lillian nodded slowly. "I get it. I guess I've been taking advantage a bit." We worked out a system. She'd give me at least 24 hours notice before bringing the kids over. No more doorstep drop-offs, no more surprise weekend stays. We'd stick to a regular schedule, Tuesday afternoons and Thursday mornings, when I could properly plan my workload around childcare. Things improved after that. The kids still came over, but on a predictable schedule that let me arrange my work accordingly. I even started enjoying our time together more, now that it wasn't forced on me. As Christmas approached, I made plans with my college friends for a ski trip in the mountains. It would be my first real vacation in ages, no work, no family drama, just snow and freedom. When I heard Lillian was planning a family trip to Europe, I figured it was perfect timing. Surely a family vacation meant the whole family, kids included. 2 days before my departure, I stopped by Lillian's house with Christmas presents for the kids. The living room was chaos, suitcases everywhere, clothes laid out on every surface. Dad and Sarah were there too, Sarah directing the packing like a general organizing troops. "These are so cute," Lillian exclaimed as the kids tore into their early presents. "They can play with them while staying at your place during Christmas." I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. "What?" "Oh, it's going to be amazing," Lillian continued, apparently oblivious to my shock. "Marcus's college friends are joining us in Paris, and then we're hitting the ski slopes in Switzerland. No kids allowed, it'll be just like old times." "I'm leaving for a ski trip tonight," I said slowly. "With my friends. I've had these plans for months." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched my father's face turn that familiar shade of red that always preceded an explosion. "I couldn't care less about your plans," he spat, standing up from his armchair. "When are you going to grow up and realize that family comes first? Looking after your sister's children is your responsibility." "My responsibility?" I echoed, incredulous. "Since when is it my responsibility to be their full-time babysitter?" Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of disapproval I'd grown all too familiar with over the years. "Chloe, you can't just put your selfish desires above family plans. What were you thinking, making vacation arrangements without consulting any of us? That's not how family works." I let out a harsh laugh. "Consulting you? That's rich. Did any of you consult me before planning your European vacation? Did anyone even think to ask if I was available to watch the kids?" "We shouldn't have to ask," Lillian chimed in, bouncing Emma on her hip. "You're their aunt. Then why don't you ask their grandmother?" I gestured toward Sarah. "She's family too, isn't she?" Sarah's perfectly maintained expression cracked slightly. "Don't be ridiculous. I can't possibly watch them, it's far too demanding at my age. Besides," she smoothed her designer blouse, "your father and I are going on the trip too." "Of course you are," I muttered. "So everyone gets a vacation except me?" "That's enough," Dad roared, making Emma start crying. "I've had it with your attitude, young lady. You've been difficult since you were a child, but this is the last straw. If you can't put family first, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family's future. The inheritance will go entirely to Lillian, every last penny." Something snapped inside me. Years of manipulation, of being the family doormat, of having my life treated as less important than everyone else's, It all came rushing to the surface. "You know what? Keep your damn inheritance," I shouted, grabbing my coat. "I'm done being threatened. I'm done being manipulated. You all can go straight to hell." The door slammed behind me with satisfying force. My hands were shaking as I drove home, but I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally broken free of invisible chains. I threw myself into packing and left to meet my friends, turning off my phone as we headed toward the mountains. It wasn't until I was settled in our cozy cabin that evening that I thought to check the security camera feed I'd installed after one too many surprise visits from Lillian. They had been there, all of them, Dad pounding on my door, Sarah trying to peer through the peephole, Lillian bouncing a crying Emma while James sat on the floor playing with his toy cars. They had stayed for hours, alternating between pleading and threatening, clearly unable to process that I'd actually chosen myself over their demands for once. My phone buzzed constantly during the first day of vacation. I had muted all their notifications, but I could still see the numbers climbing: 27 missed calls from Dad, 43 from Lillian, 15 from Sarah. The voicemails and messages piled up, each more desperate than the last. "If you don't call back right now, young lady," Dad's voice thundered through one message I accidentally played before deleting. Sarah's texts were a masterclass in guilt-tripping. "I've never seen the children so upset. How could you abandon your own family at Christmas? Your poor sister is devastated. Is this really the kind of person you want to be?" Lillian's video messages were the worst, her perfectly made-up face streaked with tears, Emma crying in the background. "Please, Chloe. We can't find anyone else on such short notice. I'll pay you double what I usually do." I turned my phone off completely after that. My friends noticed my tension and suggested we hit the slopes early. The bite of cold air and the rush of skiing helped clear my head. 3 days into our trip, my cousin Rachel texted, "Just heard what happened. Don't worry too much, Sarah finally found someone through her country club friends to watch the kids. Some retired teacher or something. She's charging them a fortune though. Guess professional childcare isn't so cheap after all." I couldn't help but smile at that. They'd finally had to face the reality of what their constant demands had been costing me. When I returned home a week later, my social media notifications were exploding. Dad had made a public post, complete with old family photos of him with Lillian and me as children. It pains me to write this, but today I officially disown my eldest daughter, Chloe. She has betrayed not only me but our entire family, abandoning her sister and young niece and nephew at Christmas to pursue her own selfish desires. A true daughter would never put her own wishes above her family's needs. From this day forward, all my property and assets will go to my younger daughter Lillian, who understands the true meaning of family loyalty. Chloe is no longer welcome in our home or our lives. The post had hundreds of reactions, mostly from Dad's business associates and church friends offering sympathy and condemning my selfishness. Sarah had shared it with additional commentary about ungrateful children and modern values destroying family bonds. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the app without liking, commenting, or sharing. Let them have their public meltdown. I had work to do, and for the first time in years, a quiet apartment all to myself. A week after Dad's dramatic social media announcement, I received a message that made my heart stop. The notification simply read, "Catherine Mitchell wants to connect with you." My mother's name appearing on my screen like a ghost from the past. Her message was long, carefully worded. "Chloe, I saw your father's post. I know it's been many years, and I have so much to explain. Would you be willing to meet with me? I understand if you don't want to, but please know that I've never stopped thinking about you and Lillian." My hand shook as I read the rest. She'd been following our lives through social media all these years, my college graduation, Lillian's wedding, the birth of my niece and nephew. She'd been there, watching from a distance, unable to reach out. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe across town. Walking in, I spotted her immediately. She looked older than in my memories, of course, but her eyes were the same. When she hugged me, I caught the faintest whiff of the lavender perfume she used to wear when I was little. I'm so sorry, Chloe, she said as we sat down. I know an apology can't make up for all these years, but you need to know the truth. The story she told made me feel sick. Dad had been systematically keeping her away from us, all while painting himself as the victim. He'd send her photos and videos of us with Sarah, birthday parties, school events, family vacations, along with messages about how happy we were with our real mother. Look how well they're doing, he'd write. Sarah is such a wonderful mother to them. They don't even remember you anymore. Why would you want to disrupt their lives now? She pulled out her phone, showing me years of messages from Dad, each one more manipulative than the last. The girls call Sarah Mom now. It would only confuse them if you tried to come back into their lives. Chloe's doing so well in school. Sarah helps her with all her homework. She's forgotten all about you. Lillian asked why she doesn't look like her mommy Sarah. We told her she takes after her daddy. She's so happy with that answer. Don't ruin it for her. But the biggest revelation was about money. Mom had been sending substantial alimony payments all these years, thanks to her successful career as a corporate lawyer and her marriage to a wealthy businessman. Your father and I had an agreement, she said, stirring her untouched coffee. All the alimony I paid for you was supposed to be given to you when you turned 18. It was enough to buy you a small apartment, give you a start in life. He promised me he'd tell you about it. I thought about all the times Dad had dangled his inheritance over my head, using it to control me. All those years, he'd been threatening to withhold money that wasn't even his to begin with, money that had come from the mother he'd told me had abandoned us. That night, I sat at my computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I started typing. In response to my father's recent post about disowning me, I feel compelled to share some truths that have recently come to light. For years, I believed what my father told me about my mother, that she abandoned us, that she didn't want us, that she chose alcohol and other men over her daughters. I believed him when he said we were better off without her. Today, I learned that every word was a lie. My mother never abandoned us. She was pushed away by a man who used manipulation and lies to maintain control over his daughters. While he painted himself as our savior, he was secretly receiving substantial alimony payments from our mother, money that was meant to be given to me when I turned 18. Instead, he held this money over my head for years, threatening to withhold his inheritance if I didn't comply with his demands. He sent our mother photos and videos of us with our stepmother, telling her we were happier without her, that we'd forgotten her, that we called another woman mom. He convinced her that reaching out would harm us psychologically. All while she watched us grow up from a distance, sending money she thought would secure my future. To my father, keep your money. I don't want an inheritance built on lies. I don't want anything from a man who could so cruelly separate children from their mother for his own benefit. To those who commented on his post about family loyalty, you don't know the whole story. You never did. The responses came flooding in immediately. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years expressed their shock and disgust. Old family friends reached out with stories of their own about Dad's controlling behavior. Several of Dad's business associates quietly unfriended him. Dad's message came late that night, Chloe, you've misunderstood everything. I was only trying to protect you girls. If you'll let me explain. I blocked him without reading the rest. Sarah tried calling next, then Lillian. I blocked them too. It hurt to cut off my sister, but watching her turn into a mirror image of our father hurt more. Her sense of entitlement, her manipulation, her absolute certainty that she was always right, she'd learned well from him. Mom helped me find an apartment in her neighborhood, insisting on buying it outright. Now, 6 months later, we have dinner together 3 times a week. She tells me stories about my early childhood, fills in the blank spaces in my memory. Sometimes we look through her old photos, ones I'd never seen before, of her holding me as a baby, teaching me to walk, reading to me and Lillian. Do you think you'll ever speak to Lillian again? Mom asked me recently. I thought about my sister, about how thoroughly Dad had shaped her into his image. Maybe someday, I said. If she ever learns to think for herself. But I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focused on rebuilding my relationship with my mother, making up for all those lost years. I'm learning that family isn't about obligation or control or threats. It's about love, respect, and truth, qualities I never found in my father's house, but discover every day with my mom. Sometimes I still get messages from flying monkeys, Dad's friends, church members, distant relatives who think I should forgive and forget. I delete them all. I've spent enough years living under the weight of other people's expectations. I'm finally free.